Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. It's about 12:01 now, so I'm sure we might have a few more guests come through, but we do have about an hour today, so I'm going to get us started. I'd like to first thank everybody for taking time out of your days to join us, which should be an educational hour with the Excell and Ultralife team. Our team had believed it was a great time for today's topic of the current state of medical device battery procurement. As we've seen some customers face some challenges recently in the supply chain and procurement sector. So, as I said, we have about an hour, so I want to keep it as much as I can to schedule. There will be a Q&A button at the bottom of the browser throughout the webinar, so please feel free to ask away any questions you have. And following today's presentations, we will open up that Q&A comments and get some answers for you. So without further ado, next slide, please, Randall. Today's agenda, I'll give us a little speaker introduction before we send things off to Mike McWillie, who will, his topic will be understanding medical device battery applications. Following that, he'll send it off to Karen Craig to go through some regulatory considerations when bringing a medical battery device to market. And then Eric Lynn from Ultralife will be discussing the current trends in the medical battery industry and market. And I'll finish off with a little about Excell Battery and Ultralife. So without further ado, I will send it off. Oh, I'll do a little bit of a speaker introduction. So we have Mike McWillie. He is our Director of Engineering with Excell. He's based out of our head office in British Columbia. We have Karen Craig, who's the Regional Manager, as well out of our head office in Surrey, BC. And then Eric Lind, who is Vice President of Commercial Operations and Business Development with Ultralife. And yours truly, Charlie Steele. I am the Canadian and US Sales Representative for Excell. So without further ado, I'll send it off to Mike for his first topic.
Thanks, Charlie. All right. There are kind of a few different battery types commonly used in medical devices today. At the highest level, two main types, primary and secondary. Primary being non-rechargeable, secondary being rechargeable. We're mostly going to focus on secondary for the application section here today, as that should be what the majority of you are interested in. Within the secondary category, kind of three main types used in medical devices: lithium-ion, nickel metal hydride, and sealed lead acid. Lithium-ion, by far the most common. Couple different chemistry groups within the lithium-ion umbrella that can kind of best be thought of in two groups. There's lithium iron phosphate, which has a nominal voltage of 3.2 volts per cell, and the nickel, manganese, cobalt-based chemistries with a nominal voltage of 3.6 or 3.7 volts per cell. Lithium iron phosphate is less energy dense, but at the same time also a little bit less volatile. Often gets chosen as a replacement for lead acids, as it can be a pretty easy drop-in for common 12 and 24 volt lead acid assemblies, due to the fact that they can be assembled in a way that have pretty much the identical voltage curve. The nickel, manganese, cobalt chemistries are definitely more common because they have the greatest energy density, which just means that they'll be the smallest and lightest for a given amount of runtime. Nickel metal hydride, not as oftenly used in new stuff, being about half the energy density of lithium ion, but at the same time, it's not uncommon to be looking at nickel metal hydride when looking for a replacement or second source for a product that's been on the market for a while. These applications being designed around nickel metal hydride can't just move straight to lithium ion because the chemistries have very different charging methods, and you can't just drop a lithium ion pack into a nickel metal hydride application without respinning that charge circuit and no longer being backwards compatible. Nickel metal hydride does have one advantage in that it's not classified as dangerous goods for shipping, though the lower energy density usually isn't worth the trade-off for new stuff. And sealed lead acid is less energy dense again, still somewhat common in medical carts or large stationary equipment. It's been around for a very long time. It can be pretty reliable if maintained properly, and did fit the needs for many of these types of applications. Having said that, newer systems are generally designed around lithium ion for the increase in energy density. They can be significantly smaller and lighter for the same amount of energy, making them more portable. So as we discussed, lithium ion by far the most dominant type. A few things about lithium ion batteries that do need to be considered while sourcing them. They're often custom designed to fit the exact needs of your product. They will all contain some form of protective circuitry, which is needed to keep the lithium ion cells within their safe operating limits. Sometimes on top of that basic protection circuitry, medical applications will include a fuel gauge, which is a circuit that monitors the amount of energy within the battery, among other things, and communicates that out to the host device. One extra benefit you also get with a fuel gauge is that it's possible to include battery authentication through a key exchange, which can prevent a non-certified battery from being used in your device. Can sometimes be a helpful risk control for your design team while they're working through their FMEAs. Given that they're usually custom, if you're looking for a second source on an existing application, you'll need to make sure the protection circuitry is compatible with the needs of the device. There are a few traps that people often fall into here with circuitry that is, not exactly the same, but intended to be compatible. One common one is like startup current pulses. When you turn the device on and it charges its internal capacitors, those pulses can exceed the specified thresholds of the protection circuit and cause it to shut off the output. These can be pretty simple things to solve if they're figured out up front with a few measurements and save a whole bunch of headache later on in the cycle.
Yes.
All right. Batteries within medical devices, usually either a firm requirement or some kind of risk control. And portable devices will just function entirely on battery power. There's a lot of focus on safety, but we also shouldn't overlook reliability. Batteries are being used as backup for risk control. Pretty important, and it works when it needs to. And it's one area where sometimes buying the least expensive option up front isn't always a cost-saving measure over the life of the product. Few important things to consider when evaluating the reliability of the battery. Generally start with the manufacturer and type of the cells. They make up the majority of the assembly, and trying to stick with high quality cells from known manufacturers that have the history to support it and will likely continue to be around for a long time can save a bunch of headache. Within the cell specs themselves, at the high level, a few things to look out for are the cycle life. This directly correlates to how long the battery can be used in the field before replacement. Cycle life can vary quite a bit across chemistries, and finding a balance between performance and cycle life does require some thought. And just for some context, one cycle in that case is charge discharge. Sometimes a few tricks in the specs as well, where that the number of cycles is not specified to the same amount of degradation. Cycle life to 80% of initial capacity is kind of a de facto standard, but there are some that are specified to 70% or even less, which you can totally normalize for when evaluating them. Just need to be aware of it. And recommended storage temperatures, fairly important in extending the life of the battery as well. If they're stored outside of their temperature ranges, especially on the high side, they'll degrade at a faster rate than specified. And another one that's a pretty good metric is maximum charge and discharge currents for the cells. In lithium ion cells, these currents directly correlate to the internal impedance of the cells. So a cell that is capable of higher charge and discharge rates will also have a lower internal impedance, which means it'll generate less heat in the battery itself at any given load and result in a higher typical voltage under that same load. So it's often worth selecting a cell that is overspec'd in the rate, charge and discharge rate specs, because that degradation as it ages will be less noticeable. As I mentioned in previous slides there, these are often custom designed rather than off-the-shelf things. So knowing that we're not just talking about picking the battery itself, but picking the team that will design it. Pretty important that you choose a team that is both capable and willing to do what it takes to kind of integrate with your team for the life of the project. The battery is so tightly integrated into the system and its risk controls that trying to do both halves on their own often results in surprises late when they are really painful. And the specs are not necessarily locked in when you start either. So being able to kind of adapt as you go is pretty helpful. And as I'm sure you're all aware of, one of the key areas of focus during the design cycle is mitigating supply chain risk. We've definitely all had it pretty rough the last little while, and a few things we can do up front to try and reduce some of that risk. These mostly center around selecting alternates for all of the safety critical components during the design cycle and qualifying them either right up front or as they're needed. Karen will talk a little bit about this in the regulatory portion, but there are quite a few hurdles with changing parts on a product that's already gone through certification testing. If alternates for some of the most important things like FETs, thermistors, and cells are chosen up front, that runway can be shortened quite a bit. And it's also possible to just certify the alternates up front and buy whatever is available when needed. So with that, probably a good point to hand it over to Karen. We'll cover the regulatory considerations. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. I'll start talking about regulatory compliance on the next slide. There we go. Regulatory compliance is crucial when designing and manufacturing medical devices, medical device batteries to ensure their safety, efficacy, and reliability. Here's an overview of the key regulatory standards for medical device battery. First being ISO 1345. 1345 is an international standard that outlines the requirements of a quality management system specific to the medical device industry. Manufacturers must implement and maintain the system. ISO 62133 sets safety standard requirements for portable sealed secondary lithium cells. Compliance with this standard is crucial for ensuring battery safety. The device classification defines the regulatory requirements for the battery. Certification is mandatory for the medical market. US, Europe, and Asia require medical devices to comply with IEC 60601 series of standards. The IEC 60601-1 outlines general safety and performance requirements for medical electrical equipment, and IEC 60601-2 addresses electromagnetic compatibility, EMC considerations. Good idea to remember. Always consult the latest guidelines and regulatory documents from relevant authorities to ensure complete compliance with current regulatory regulations. Additionally, seeking advice from regulatory experts or consultants specialized in medical devices and batteries is highly recommended. Excell does work with a third-party test lab, and we can help walk you through this process. Moving on to the slide here, IEC 62133. There are several benefits that you see below for IEC 62133 safety testing. Ensuring product safety. By complying with the requirements of the tests set out in the standard, manufacturers can help to ensure the batteries are safe for consumers to use. Reducing the risk of accidents. Lithium-ion batteries have been known to catch fire or explode if not properly designed, manufactured, or used. IEC 62133 testing helps to identify potential safety hazards and reduce the risk of accidents. Meeting regulatory requirements. Many countries have regulations in place that require products containing lithium-ion batteries to meet certain safety standards. Compliance with IEC 62133 testing can help manufacturers meet these regulations. And building consumer trust. Consumers are increasingly aware of potential safety hazards associated with lithium-ion batteries. By conducting the IEC 62133 testing and complying with the standard, manufacturers can build trust with consumers and differentiate their products from competitors. And improving product quality. The testing procedures set out in IEC 62133 can help to identify potential quality issues with lithium-ion batteries, leading to improvements in design, manufacturing, and performance. And the next slide, there we go. IEC 62133 testing includes four, and more, but the big four tests here are electrical performance testing to verify that the battery meets specified electrical performance criteria, including voltage, capacity, and discharge characteristics. Mechanical testing to evaluate the battery for mechanical robustness, including aspects like crush, shock, and vibration resistance. Environmental testing subjects the battery to environmental conditions such as temperature cycling, humidity, and exposure to hazardous substances. And abuse testing performed to simulate potential misuse or abuse scenarios, including overcharge, short circuit, and external short circuit. Costs for the IEC 62133 testing varies depending on the battery, but generally I estimate about $10,000 plus the cost of 40 battery packs for destructive testing. Timeline can usually take 10 to 12 weeks. And yeah, next slide. UL 2054 is a safety standard for household and commercial batteries, including batteries used in consumer electronics and certain industrial applications. It covers various aspects of battery safety, including electrical, mechanical, and environmental considerations. Now, while UL 2054 is not specifically tailored for medical devices, it can still be relevant for batteries used in certain types of medical devices, particularly those intended for consumer or home use. It provides an additional layer of safety assurance. UL 2054 certification indicates that the battery has undergone testing for various safety aspects, which can provide an extra level of assurance regarding its safe use. It aligns with industry recognized safety standards, which can be considered good practice for any type of battery, including those used in medical devices. And if the medical device is used for consumer use, having a UL 2054 certified battery can instill confidence in end users regarding the safety of their product. And it helps in mitigating risks associated with battery operations, such as overcharge, short circuit, and exposure to extreme conditions. UL 2054 is a broader standard covering a wide range of batteries for various applications, while IEC 62133 is more specific, focusing on lithium-ion and lithium-ion cells and battery packs. For medical device batteries, compliance with IEC 62133 is particularly important to ensure that the battery meets the necessary safety standards for use in healthcare settings. Estimate costs, if you want to add UL 2054 testing, is around $16,000 plus the cost of 50 battery packs for destructive testing. And that timeline is, I usually estimate 12 to 16 weeks for that one. I think we all know about UN 38.3. It's also known as transport of dangerous goods, lithium metal, and lithium-ion batteries. It's a set of safety tests and criteria established by the United Nations for safe transport of lithium batteries. These tests are crucial for ensuring that lithium batteries meet specific safety standards, especially for transportation by air, sea, and land. UN 38.3 testing consists of several specific tests, and they're listed there on the right-hand side. Mechanical shock, vibration, crush, thermal test, external short circuit, and impact, among others. Costs and timeline for the UN test report is about $2,500. 16 batteries are required. Timeline usually around 6 weeks. And we installed a QR code there if you want to take a picture. It will send you to our Excell Battery Safety Training site. It's actually our Excell Battery website, which has a whole bunch of videos and resources that you can learn more about UN 38.3 and other battery scenarios. Next slide. Okay, so in summary, suppliers of medical device batteries play a critical role in ensuring that their products meet regulatory requirements. Here's an overview of how we typically handle regulatory considerations. Reputable battery suppliers will provide documentation demonstrating compliance with relevant standards and regulations. This may include certificates of compliance, test reports, and material safety data sheets. We will typically conduct UN 38.3 testing on our batteries to demonstrate compliance with safety requirements for transport. IEC 62133 testing to ensure products meet safety standards. ISO 1345 compliant quality management systems. This ensures our processes meet the specific quality standards for specifically medical devices. We offer custom battery solutions tailored to specific medical device requirements. These solutions are designed with regulatory compliance in mind. We ensure batteries are properly labeled and marked with relevant safety information, including compliance with UN 38.3, IEC 62133, and other applicable standards. Our processes are in place to monitor and maintain compliance with evolving regulations. We need to stay updated and due on any changes in standards or requirements. And conduct audits or inspections of our suppliers to verify their compliance with regulatory requirements. And we offer support and guidance to our customers, including assistance with documentation, compliance checks, and any advice on navigating regulatory processes. I will now hand it over to Eric Lynn to talk a bit about current trends in the medical battery industry market.
All right, thanks a lot, Karen. I appreciate it. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is really what we're seeing just in the battery industry in general, both from a supply chain standpoint as well as a technical standpoint, and how this can relate to medical products. So what we find is that a lot of the things that we're seeing today across the battery industry with the growth of EVs and energy storage really has an effect on what would be considered traditional lithium-ion batteries that were essentially developed for applications, 10, 15 years ago, and how these trends are impacting the potential opportunities and availability of products, in this segment. So if we go to the next slide. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is on just what's happening in some of the technology pieces and really focusing on lithium ion. Mike gave a good discussion on just kind of the differences between the chemistry systems. But even within the chemistry system, you do see some advancements happening that will impact both performance of the battery systems and potential availability kind of moving forward. I think the first thing to kind of get out there is that lithium ion is going to be around for, there's really not going to be anything to replace it from an advanced chemistry system standpoint, probably what I would consider over the short to near term, at least, 5 to 10 years. And simply because of the time it takes to develop a new chemistry system and bring it to market. But we do see a lot of different things that are happening within the lithium ion chemistry system that really driven by EVs and EV development that can impact future medical devices. I think the first thing, and Mike mentioned this, is a little bit is on the NMC chemistry for lithium ion. This is a nickel manganese cobalt blend that's used for the cathode or the positive material. What we're beginning to see is higher increases in nickel content versus going from equal percentages of each of the nickel, manganese, and cobalt to higher percentages of nickel. And what this essentially does, it allows for more capacity to be in kind of the same cell volume, cell weight, which is obviously will extend the availability of medical devices. The second thing is the introduction of silicon as an anode, which is the negative material to increase capacity. Typical anode systems are use graphite. Silicon itself has about 10 times the amount of energy storage capability by weight versus graphite. However, there is some degradation in that, and so you'll never get 10 times the amount. If you had a perfect silicon anode, you would never get 10 times the amount of energy because you have to match it up with a proper cathode. But what we see is that a small amount of silicon can have substantial increases in battery chemistry systems. So the more that you begin to see that, and then the last thing is I know Mike talked a little bit about the lithium iron phosphate. This is a kind of a direct replacement to lead acid. It is a little bit more stable, as he mentioned, a 3.2 volt chemistry system versus the lithium ion, which is 3.6. But it does have lower energy density, both by volume and by weight. And what you're seeing, and you're beginning to see, is the introduction of manganese in with the iron phosphate cathode system. That really does a couple of different things. It increases the energy density of the lithium, kind of the lithium phosphate types of the lithium metal phosphate types of systems, and increases the voltage as well. And it makes it more compatible with traditional lithium ion systems. So what that allows you to do is that you begin to see these kind of increasing capacities, and customers don't necessarily want to change kind of electronics to be able that they have in their device. This could be a potential replacement technology inside the devices that they currently have. It also offers some of the same benefits that iron phosphate has in terms of cycle life, in terms of stability of the system. So that's something to be aware of. Some of the advanced chemistry systems you might have heard of really are more 5, 10 or further away. Lithium sulfur is one type of system where you use a kind of a sulfur-based cathode system replacing the NMC technologies. You do have lower you do have a lower voltage range in that, but you do have more energy, by energy capacity just due to the chemistry system, and it can be potentially lower cost. Everybody, a lot of people probably heard about solid state batteries. Really solid state batteries are basically have a solid electrolyte, and allows you to kind of use materials that give a significant amount of energy density, up to 2 to 3 times the same volume that you would have. There's a lot of development that's going on with those chemistry systems right now. Again, focused much more on the EV market. Really, those chemistry systems have not been able to show cycle life would be effective in say a medical device today, or just the cost is still kind of too high and needs to kind of come down. And the final one is just kind of a sodium ion battery. Essentially, imagine that the charge carrier, which is typically lithium in these systems, it leads to sodium. This is sodium is very abundant metal. These systems are just kind of can be much larger systems, much more lower cost systems, but still in development. So where the potential of these could be is for replacements into kind of larger format battery systems that could be used. But again, it is a very much of an energy storage type of application. Okay, next slide. Just in terms of what we're seeing in terms of battery technology and design choices, and it really comes down to applications. And from this standpoint, we see it kind of going in 2 directions. One, we see kind of larger systems and really kind of advances in mobility of these larger systems. The introduction of higher rate lithium ion options, really kind of driven some by the automotive, but also some by kind of portable portable household electronics, allowing for higher capacity, again, the lower internal resistance, have begun to give opportunities for replacements of lead acid batteries. Things like in workstations, the computer workstations you see in the hospitals, but also like portable X-ray machines, portable MRI systems, robotics. And this allows in kind of a hospital setting, allows for mobility of these traditional tethered devices, so that you can go room to room and be able to use the devices without having it kind of in a stationary place. So the other thing that, versus lithium ion versus lead acid is that you decrease the size and weight of the battery while also improving the runtime. And, it is going to be kind of a lithium ion are typically is going to be higher in cost versus a lead acid system. But the increase of service life, the increase of the cycle life over the life of the product and replacement cycle time are significantly lower. You have a significantly lower replacement cycle with lithium ion than you do with lead acid, and therefore you get a better total cost of ownership when devices are going to last 10 or 15 years on a floor. Yeah. The other area that is kind of moving to is smaller battery systems, really driven by more and more wearables. These are applications such as like diagnostic patches, monitoring patches, drug delivery. You see some of this in, when we take a look at all of the wearables, I guess in the space, you can see these things in kind of like hearable systems, things that have just, kind of moved from kind of hearing aids to kind of more music and things like that. But you see some of the same stuff used in like Fitbit, if you want to consider those kind of medical applications. You see lithium ion kind of, getting a threshold in there. We see these both in rechargeable solutions as well as non-rechargeable solutions. And frankly, there are some opportunities for non-rechargeable solutions in the medical space because some of these products can be thrown away. And so that's or single-use type of items. And so sometimes a non-rechargeable system, because of the complexity of designing something like that is less, that sometimes that's one of choice. And these can, again, be both in round form factors or flat form factors in kind of like a pouch style design. And what we've seen in the improvement in chemistries that we've seen in rechargeables is kind of comes to these kind of smaller form factors as well, and really provides the viable operation life that a device needs. As you begin to get smaller and smaller, what happens is that will it last enough for a user that it's, that they're able to kind of go through whatever their usage pattern is. And you've seen these kind of improvements in chemistry systems that have allowed that. So next slide. Just on the, and I know this is from a purchasing standpoint, this is something that we see all the time as we talk to our medical customers is, what's going on in the global supply chain. COVID-19 really hit, I think the battery space a lot as chip manufacturers and things like that slowed down in the Far East. And then they had to kind of ramp back up as demand continued and really began not only in the medical space, but also in the consumer space. And so chipsets and electrical components were kind of limited, and we began to see extended lead times on things. So that's kind of one of the things. But also material supply impacted this. About 18 to 24 months ago, we saw a huge increase in lithium costs going up, really driven by the initial growth of EVs. Right, lithium was used in those systems, but it also is used in products that we have, and we saw product pricing going up. It wasn't necessarily because of lithium availability. Lithium can be mined in a variety of different places, but really most of the precursor material is processed in China, and which has a large capacity of essentially the refining of this precursor material. You begin to see other companies looking at increasing and improving and introducing their own now as this kind of EV phenomenon becomes much more global to have local supply chains. But that's going to take time. So a lot of the demand, from the kind of lithium and the precursor materials was kind of centered around, in China. And then recently, graphite, as we mentioned, is the negative material used in these batteries, is in the anode material. There's recently China has a graphite ban or special licensing that's needed in order to kind of export graphite to the cell manufacturers. And really, 70% of graphite used in lithium-ion batteries comes from China. There are other companies that do it here, here in North America, but also in Europe, but at a much smaller scale. Both of these can kind of impact costs and availability of the batteries and the raw material for the batteries, and ultimately the batteries for medical devices. The other thing is shipping regulations. What we're finding is, and we've found over the last 3, 4, 5 years, is that shipping regulations in terms of shipping lithium-ion batteries are becoming more and more stringent, and more requirements are being placed on that. It's also increasing costs to the battery supplier to be able to deliver against that. And I think that, this is one of the reasons why having a organization that's used to providing kind of not only the right, the right design, but a safe design that can be transported is critical. And I think I talked a little bit about the electric components earlier, just in terms of the long lead times. And while it's, as I mentioned here in the slide, while it's improving, it's really still recovering from kind of the pandemic related slowdowns that occurred during COVID. So next slide, please. So one of the things is, what are some of the things that you can do, and some of the things that we do in order to kind of mitigate some of these risks. I know Mike touched on some of these in his presentation, so some of these will seem redundant. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to separate this both in terms of the design and purchasing, which is how basically getting the stuff from, working as you work through your design and as you start buying the batteries for the first time. What are some of the things that you can introduce in order to kind of make sure that you have batteries when you need it? And then once you get into manufacturing, right, how can you ensure that, if any of these things happen, that, in terms of some global issues happen, what you can do to help ensure that you have a supply of batteries, and that the battery availability is not impacting your business. So the first thing on the design and purchasing, Mike mentioned this, is really alternative component selection and early on in the design. What are those critical components that you want to have alternative options for you in case you have one of the manufacturers, a component, ends up either going end of life of the component, or they have a huge rush on the components. You get weak lead times. We've seen lead times of 52 up to 75 weeks in electric components. And so that's critical for us in terms of looking at this. Secondly, it's really working with the battery supplier in providing a forecast and establishing long-term forecasts for these critical components. The more that we know about a company's business, and the more that your battery supplier knows about your business, the better that they're able to kind of put together a supply chain a program for you in order to make sure that they'll be able to get you the parts when you need it. And then the final thing in this kind of design and purchasing is really establishing the master supply agreements that both companies can agree to, or other business arrangements like stocking agreements and things like that will allow to ensure that you have, so that a company's not keeping a lot of batteries in house and tying up a lot of their storage or potential revenue generation from that standpoint, but that you work with your battery supplier in order to kind of make sure that you have a very kind of smooth flow of products through there. On the manufacturing side, it's really kind of dual sourcing is what we see some companies doing, not wanting to put all of their business in one basket, and kind of really choosing a couple of different suppliers. That's a way of kind of mitigating some of these risks. And the other thing is contingency planning. And this is something that really gets overlooked a lot for a lot of different customers, is what happens to my factory what happens to my supply to customers if something happens to my factory? I think one of the things you'll see is just, from our standpoint, we're very much of a global company. We have similar manufacturing on a global basis, and we can do a lot of this contingency planning already, so that we can make sure that our, our supplier or our customers won't be without. I hate to say it, but some of this will be added to cost and things like that, and there will be some cost increases on that. But it's always better to do this up front. I look at this as being very much like insurance, because the time it takes, and as you medical device designers know, just the time it takes to qualify components, not only initially early on, but any kind of regulatory FDA or items like that, how long it takes to do some of that, making sure that you have a backup supply or a backup supply chain is critical, and that is something that your battery manufacturer, the one that you choose, should be considered early on in the design cycle. So next slide. All right, so what I want to do is talk a little bit. I'm going to share a few slides, a little bit about our company at Ultralife, kind of the things that we do, and then I'll turn over to Charlie to tell you a little bit more about Excell. So if we can go to the next slide. So Ultralife, we are we're a leader in developing and designing batteries in a variety, non-rechargeable and rechargeable, for some of the most demanding applications, where things like safety, performance, reliability are critical. to our end customers. We have, we just had our third quarter, revenue, third quarter earnings announcement. You can see some of the financials on the left-hand side there. I think what's interesting is that Ultralife does have two different divisions. We have our battery energy product, which Ultralife and Excell are kind of part of. We also have an Ultralife, communication systems group, which is a relatively small portion of our business. It focuses really on a lot of government defense type of applications, those things that are kind of attached to kind of military radio systems and all the peripherals that are around that. From a revenue standpoint and kind of segmentation, you can see here that right now these fluctuate on a quarter by quarter basis, but the three largest segments that we have are both government defense, the oil and gas and subsea type of applications, and medical and healthcare. And medical and healthcare, at some times, just because this past quarter, we had a very good government defense push here, kind of allowed that to kind of move up. But really, medical is typically our second or, either first or second in terms of kind of delivery. So we do have a lot of experience in doing medical products. We've done them for a long time. If we go to the next slide, this just kind of gives you a little bit of our product portfolio. You can see that we do both small and large systems, across our organization. We do battery packs. These are some of the standard battery packs that we do, that we sell to a variety of different, for a lot of, whether it's military or other types of applications. If you look down on the medical side, we do some powered card solutions. We do some custom batteries. This is where we really act as a consultant. We want to get involved early on in the process so that we can kind of work with you in terms of your design and ideas, all the way up through production and marketing and actually ways to kind of end of life and things like that, and help plan the whole kind of process for you. So, I'm not going to kind of go through this. You can see, whether like on the battery and energy products, you can see, if you kind of go to our website, or Excell's website has, a link to it, something very similar. So, so that's a little bit about us, and I'll turn it over to Charlie to kind of finish up for us.
That's great. Thank you, Eric, Mike, and Karen. We're at 12:43 here, so we have a few more minutes. I'm going to close this off just to give you a little bit of background on Excell, as well as this visual that we're looking at here. This is just a big picture of Ultralife and its subsidiaries and where we're located. It kind of just gives us a big picture on the outreach Ultralife has and the choices and options you as a customer have under the Ultralife umbrella. So if we just do go to our next slide, if you do have any other questions in regards to our other locations in that global map, please reach out to Eric, Karen, or myself, and we'll be gladly able to help you. But if you do take a microscope and you look over that Excell location, the global map, you'll see 4 locations, and 3 of those being in Canada. Mike McWillie and our head office, they're based out of Vancouver, Canada. We also have a manufacturing location in Calgary, Mississauga, Toronto, Ontario as well, and we have Houston in Texas, USA. And if you just go to the next slide there, this is where we'll finish off what you can expect from Excell Battery Company. You can expect a leading OEM supplier of smart battery solutions for over 36 years. We have proven experience transitioning OEMs to lithium-ion technologies. We are fully supportive of medical applications, including Class 1, 2, and select Class 3 devices. We are an ISO 13485 company, and Mike and his engineering team, all located in Canada, are here to support you. We'll guide you through, as Karen said, all your design and safety regulatory requirements. And a final note here is today's medical applications are some of the most critical in the world. You and your customers depend on reliable components, especially a battery pack. So with that being said, I know we have a few questions. Yes, well, thank you guys very much for taking the time out of your day again. I know we have a few questions here, which I'm just going to open up here. Just bear with me for a moment. And I'll send it off to one of our panelists who I feel is best to answer this question. Let's start out maybe with Mike on this one. What does UL 2054 do on top of IEC 62133?
Yeah, the tests are fairly similar, but UL 2054 on top of IEC 62133 also adds faulted testing. What they'll do for those tests they'll bypass certain protective components on the board within the battery, fuses, FETs, whatever, to kind of simulate some of the common failure modes and test it with those faults in place, and it's still got to be safe.
Right. I'm going to follow up with another one for you, Mike, while I have you here. One came in that says, what are the major changes needed due to the new EU battery directive? Besides that, new products will require a replaceable battery. How will the new supply chain requirements and environmental requirement changes affect medical battery packs? It's a lot there.
That is a big question. Yeah. Still a little bit fluid, but the intent there is that they will be introduced gradually from 2025 onwards, mostly focused on recycling and recovering some of the more critical raw materials, cobalt, lithium, nickel, and so on. They will recycle those materials straight back into new batteries. And there's a fair bit of kind of pilot level stuff going on right now to produce recycled cathode materials that are almost as good or sometimes even better than new ones. So should be pretty interesting.
Great. Okay. And I think we had one more here. Sorry, I'm just dealing with. Add it up here. Here we go. I can take this one, I think. How can I maximize the lifespan of a medical device battery? Well, there's a few things that you can do. Proper storage, avoiding overcharging or deep discharging, using a compatible charger, and lastly, following the manufacturer guidelines for battery maintenance. All those are some key factors that can help maximize the lifespan of a battery pack. So that is all the questions that we have right now. We're ending about 10 minutes early here. But again, we thank you for all your time this afternoon. Again, if you have any questions, I think the last slide here will have our emails and phone numbers. Again, this presentation is recorded, so it should be available on social media platforms as of next week. So if you want to share this with any of your internal contacts, feel free to do so. But again, the Excell team and Ultralife, thank you guys for joining today, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care.